Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you are. Books, comic books, etc. Is there really any point in adapting them? I mean, if we look at history and kind of the process that adaptations have gone through and how often they just stray from the source material, and given the recent revelations that was obvious to anyone with half a brain whilst watching it, over The Witcher and Henry Cavill leaving, what is the point of adapting somebody's work if you're just going to change it so drastically? Like, honestly. So, Henry Cavill clearly clashed with the writers and the producers, and you could tell in his interviews that this was the case. Because in a lot of there, he was dropping hints about how he wanted to stay true to the character, how he would, the writers will say something and then Cavill would be like, well, no, that's not what happens in the book. In the book, this is what happens. And now it's all, since he's leaving, it's all come to the boil and it's been revealed that he often clashed with producer Lauren Schmidt. And if you know me, you know my absolute hatred for executive producers. I always said they are a detriment to the arts. They're just accountants with no talent or respect for the art. They just see money. And once again, I'm proven right. Once again, we see producers interfering, changing the source material. But it's endemic. It's like when you have people like again, within The Witcher, where a former writer comes out and says that the writers of the show mocked Andre's work. I forget his surname. There it is. Sapkowski's work. And then they have that arrogance of, we're going to put our own stamp on this, which should be Hollywood's motto. We're going to put our own stamp on this. And what happens when you put your own stamp on this? Well, you end up with tragedies like Witcher Season 2, Rings of Power, which again, we saw the writers say that they wanted to put their own stamp on this. And more egregiously, for me, was Jupiter's Legacy, which of course nobody will remember because it was such a car crash of a show. How do you take a brilliant comic book and fuck it up so badly to the point where Netflix literally cancels it a couple of days after the show's release? Like, it's that bad that Netflix were like, yeah, nah, nobody watched this crap. I mean, it was so bad. It was so bad. But I harken back to my early 20s when I was a student at the university. And I remember vividly saying about the Italian Job remake that this film is going to be a pile of shit because the writers, and I remember their interview, and you can go and find it, the writers were saying, well, we glanced at the old film, but we wanted to do it our way. And the minute I heard that, and it's always stuck with me ever since, I'm like, this happens all the time, and here we are 21 years later, and it's still going on. Like, as much as I loathe J.K. Rowling, the person, I respect the fact that she stuck around, okay, and George Martin stuck around to produce their own works. Like, again, with J.K. Rowling, and this is another thing that always stuck with me, because if you look at Percy Jackson, this is what we would have had with Harry Potter. But she was adamant. Spielberg wanted to take it to America because he's a narrow-minded, Reagan fucking waving flag shagger. All right. And allegedly, he probably isn't. But, he wanted to make him American. That works really well for Hook. All right. And J.K. Rowling was like, absolutely not. It stays here. It's all British production, British made. Otherwise, forget it. I'll go away. I don't need it. I have fuck you money. I don't need this to be made into a film. So I respect that. George R. R. Martin oversaw the process of Game of Thrones. And look how beloved Game of Thrones and Harry Potter are. Absolutely beloved genres. Because the authors were respected and their input was valued. Alright? Then you have things like Rings of Power and The Witcher and Jupiter's Legacy and Bloodshot and all these other comic book adaptations are absolute garbage because they don't follow the source material, or they're too but the main thing is don't read someone's work and say, oh, this is shit, and then still do the job. Leave. Let a fan come in and do it, and don't put in these hack producers whose mentality is stuck in the 2000s and the 90s. The early 2000s and the 90s. If you don't believe me, go see the fucking sitcom that just came out called Blockbuster. It's so stuck in the comedy, stuck there, and executive producers' brains are stuck in that era. They don't respect people's works. I mean, author adaptation, book adaptations have a history of being disrespected. It's just because now it's tapping into things that a lot of us like. Then it's like, for fuck's sake. But, you know, Stephen King, how much he hated The Shining. Kubrick pissed off a lot of authors back in the day from adapting their works and all this kind of stuff. So there's a history of it. And sometimes it's worked out great as a film and you can separate the two. But sometimes one thing is such an abomination that it derails the other person's work. And it's an injustice. And you know what? Don't bother. Just if you can't respect the original works, don't bother adapting it. Because at this point now, with the we'll make it our way, which is now going to be embedded in the psyche of everyone knowing what to expect, there's just no point. Because if you're going to make it your way, you're going to fuck it up. And you know, this is why I respect Cavill for leaving, because he's that committed to the original works that he's like, you know what? I don't need the money. I'm off. If you're not going to respect Sapkowski's work, fuck you, I'm off. And I love that. And that's why Cavill endears himself to so many people, because he is us. Just more chiseled and extremely good looking and talented and all of that. But in terms of his mentality, he is us. He is a fanboy. The only difference is he gets to live those fantasies. He gets to live the fantasy of being in those worlds. And I respect him for being open about, in his own little roundabout way, but being open about his displeasure. Not just with that, he also said it about Superman as well. Because Zack Snyder is devoid of any kind of joy. But that's it. Yeah, rant over. It's been long enough. Just don't bother adapting things. Honestly, it's just a waste of time. Let normality resume.